The advent of WWE's ruthless aggression era occurred a full generation ago, as did the very first attempt at a brand extension. The early days of those intertwining concepts could generously be described as a mixed bag for a number of reasons. The rise of Brock Lesnar, but the loss of Steve Austin and The Rock as full-time guys, plus nostalgia runs galore, a sharp decline in Raw's quality, the latter half of 2002 did indeed mark a strange transitional shift for the biggest game in town. But if consistent greatness was what you sought, there was one place to get it: on Thursday nights, where 6 of the finest wrestlers in the entire sport did what they did best. And that is have excellent matches with each other. I'm Jack from Cultaholic, and this is the true story of the SmackDown 6. At the time that the still WWF at this point held its first ever draft on Monday, March 25th, 2002, only a couple of the 6 men in this story were in a position to thrive. One of them was the 3rd overall pick in the draft, Kurt Angle. Coming off a WrestleMania 18 win over Kane, Angle was very much one of the premier players in the organization. His versatility had been well established, as not only was the Olympic hero a refined presence that could shine in even the silliest of non-wrestling segments, but his physical prowess and wrestling acumen were unreal, especially for a man with less than 4 years experience as a pro. A sharpened killer instinct perfectly contrasted his comedic chops, as Angle could be relied upon to deliver in any situation. Angle was selected to the SmackDown brand, as was his next rival. Going 11th overall was another man earmarked by the company for greatness: Edge. A lively babyface still realizing his potential, Edge fit the mold of what the organization wanted in a top guy. He had Hollywood good looks, boundless energy, quality promo skills, and great instincts as an in-ring performer. The smoke-filled entrance with the Rob Zombie music heralded what may as well have been a test tube main eventer concocted in the Stamford lab. Edge was a natural foil for Kurt Angle, and they spent the spring of 2002 getting the best out of each other. Whether it was Edge embarrassing Angle with some sort of rib or joke, or the two throwing down in a heated battle, their matches were among the highlights of the time. The best bout between the pair was at that year's Judgment Day, when Edge defeated Angle in a hair versus hair match, resulting in Angle receiving the post-match trimming. And that highlights the danger of such matches, because Edge did such a good job shaving Angle's head that his hair is yet to grow back. But jokes aside, Kurt Angle and Edge were indeed in WWE's upper echelon at the time of the draft, or at least adjacent to it. The same couldn't exactly be said of the next 4 names. Going 5th overall in the draft, also to SmackDown, was Chris Benoit. Now, saying that Benoit wasn't an upper echelon guy is wrong on the surface, but at the time of the draft, Benoit had been on the shelf for close to 9 months while recovering from neck surgery. And there's no doubt that if Benoit were active at the time, he'd have been thriving on a level somewhere in Angle and Edge's vicinity. However, the Canadian crippler wouldn't return on screen until the end of May, and didn't resume wrestling until early July, just over 1 year after his last previous match. But at least high regard was shown for Benoit even in his absence. He may have been missing from the picture, but by going 5th overall in the draft, it was being shown that WWE had great faith in him as a major star. Chavo Guerrero's invisibility, however, couldn't be chalked up to an injury. After the invasion angle sputtered to its end the prior November, Guerrero went adrift in that dreaded creative has nothing for you, help yourself to some catering sort of way. Other than a couple of house show matches where he worked with eventual call-up Rico, the 3rd generation Guerrero had nothing going on at all. To give you an idea of just how bad it was for poor Chavo, consider this. In the 2002 draft, in the post-Raw supplemental portion of proceedings, a number of wrestlers were randomly shuffled to either brand. Most of them were of the directionless mid-card filler variety, like the Shawn Stasiaks and Just Incredibles, and sadly D'Lo Browns of the world at this time. So which brand did Chavo go to? Well, neither. Originally, Guerrero didn't even get picked in the supplemental round. Once somebody in WWE realized this, Chavo was just randomly and quietly assigned to SmackDown the week after the draft, where his first order of business was to team with Hugh Morris for a match on the C show Metal. So in other words, Chavo wasn't exactly setting the world on fire in 2002, but at least he had family on the way. The preceding day, Chavo's uncle, Eddie Guerrero, made his return to WWE, attacking IC champion Rob Van Dam on Monday Night Raw. Now, for some time, Eddie had been plagued by drug and alcohol-related issues, greatly affecting both his professional and personal life. He was ordered to rehab by WWE close to 1 year earlier, but a November 2001 vehicular incident at a gated community where he was staying resulted in Eddie's arrest and subsequent termination from WWE. The firing, however, proved to be the turning point Eddie needed. Swearing off his vices, Guerrero focused on getting his life back on track. For the next 4 months, Eddie worked numerous high-profile indies as well as New Japan while also remaining sober. Come March, Guerrero was offered a new deal with the Federation, albeit a very basic contract without much in the way of perks. It was a sort of prove-yourself deal. Eddie later noted that that was absolutely fine by him because all he wanted was a chance. And one of his old friends was coming along in short order. At one time, Rey Mysterio would have been considered too small for the heavyweight landscape of WWE, no matter how amazing his acrobatics were. Even if WWE still clung to that close-minded notion, Mysterio had long proven to be an exception to the rule. In the years since WCW went under, Mysterio remained active in Mexico's CMLL, as well as notable American indies, and at the time of Guerrero's comeback, Mysterio was getting ready to ink his own contract with WWE. Few would have guessed it as the rumors of Rey's signing grew more certain, but by the year's end, the well-pushed Angle and Edge, the still-injured Benoit, the languishing Chavo, the refocusing Eddie, and the incoming Rey Mysterio would come to positively define a several-month stretch of a specific TV show through their shared work together. But first, the pieces had to fall into place. As Angle and Edge wrapped up their feud on SmackDown, Benoit made his return to Monday Night Raw. Yes, despite being drafted to SmackDown 2 months earlier, Benoit turned up on the Red brand, kicking off what was basically a secondary reshuffling period. Throughout the late spring and early summer, wrestlers would cross brands here and there as WWE sought to achieve the balance they wanted, so a very relaxed crossover allowance was in place. Benoit went to Raw, where he and old Radical partner Eddie formed a heel duo. As the summer heated up, Edge and Angle remained at the top of SmackDown, while Eddie and Benoit worked high up on Raw. Chavo was meandering around the SmackDown Cruiserweight division, and vignettes hyping Mysterio's impending debut started to run on Thursday nights. At the July 23rd SmackDown tapings in Indianapolis, Mysterio made his WWE TV debut, defeating Chavo in a scintillating 6-minute match. The bout quickly established that Mysterio still possessed his world-class talents, and very quickly, the masked Marvel became a WWE crowd favorite. 1 week later, Benoit, now the IC champion after defeating Rob Van Dam on Raw, jumped to SmackDown with Eddie, lured away by GM Stephanie McMahon. Benoit crossing over was very much the doing of SmackDown's lead writer, Paul Heyman. Heyman wanted Benoit on his show, but to get him, it apparently required playing to the tastes of Raw writer Brian Gewirtz. As Bruce Pritchard remembers, Heyman knew that Gewirtz, who wrote a lot of the comedic material, enjoyed working with guys like Chris Jericho and Christian, so Heyman leveraged sending those two, as well as Christian's Un-American teammates, to Raw in order to get Benoit and Eddie Guerrero. Heyman later explained that Edge was supposed to become SmackDown's premier star and that he also had high hopes for incoming OVW grad John Cena. To help them level up, Heyman felt that ring generals like Benoit and Eddie were exactly the guys they needed to be working with. All 6 men, the soon-to-be canonized SmackDown 6, were now in the same place. That aforementioned Mysterio victory over Chavo was actually the beginning of a rather unique run, because for 22 of the next 23 weeks, SmackDown would broadcast at least one match that pitted one member of the SmackDown 6 against another. SummerSlam in 2002 had 2 such matches. The acclaimed event opened with a speedrun pitting Angle against Mysterio that most certainly ranks amongst the best sub-10-minute matches in company history. 2 matches later, Edge outclassed Eddie Guerrero in a very good match that centered around Eddie working over Edge's arm. Raw may have taken match of the night honors through the emotionally charged, unsanctioned street fight between Triple H and a returning Shawn Michaels, but SmackDown quickly established itself as the WWE show with the best wrestling. Through September, Edge continued his feud with Eddie, and also with Chavo by extension, after the uncle and nephew officially came together to form Los Guerreros. Angle pivoted off into a competitive rivalry with Benoit, while Mysterio simply continued to dazzle in whatever match he was in. At Unforgiven, the 6 men squared off, albeit in 3 different matches. Mysterio beat Chavo in the Sunday Night Heat pre-show bout, while Eddie toppled Edge in an even better match than what they had had at SummerSlam. But as far as match of the night goes, Angle and Benoit thrilled in a 14-minute battle with zero in the way of wasted motion. The momentum continued picking up on that week's SmackDown broadcast. Edge took the rubber match over Eddie in a tremendous no DQ brawl that featured heavy ladder usage in its 19-minute duration. In the main event, Mysterio went over on Angle and Benoit in a 9-minute triple threat with tons of exciting action. And meanwhile, over on Raw, Triple H was playing Conan the Nature Boy as its chosen World Heavyweight Champion, and a sense of staleness wafted through these weekly 2-hour shows. If you wanted freshness, you were going to have to find it on SmackDown, and you were bound to as well, especially as a tournament came together to crown brand-exclusive tag team champions. In between more great matches with each other, like Angle vs Edge and Benoit vs Rey on the October 3rd broadcast alone, the SmackDown 6 were composed into 3 teams for the tournament. Los Guerreros were obviously a given, while Edge and Rey came together as a team with impressive chemistry. But Benoit and Angle, they were fierce rivals at this time. However, they were forced together by GM Stephanie for the sake of proving that SmackDown's tag scene was superior to that of Raw's. And to make sure that they did their best, it was decreed that if either man screwed the other over in a match, there would be dire consequences. And this was actually inspired by an angle that Heyman ran in ECW with Chris Candido and Lance Storm 5 years prior. While Angle and Benoit came close to self-destructing at inopportune times, they kept their differences in check long enough to win in the clutch. After defeating Los Guerreros in an excellent semi-final match 3 nights before No Mercy, the two went into the pay-per-view to face Edge and Mysterio for the belts. And it was an all-time classic. On a night where Brock Lesnar and The Undertaker delivered one of the best and bloodiest Hell in a Cell matches ever, the SmackDown Tag Team Title Tournament Final was arguably the best tag team match in WWE history. Angle and Benoit narrowly won a magnum opus that took home several awards, including Match of the Year, as chosen by readers of the Wrestling Observer newsletter. The tag wars raged on as Edge and Mysterio defeated Los Guerreros on SmackDown that same week to earn a shot at the belts. Nonetheless, Eddie and Chavo challenged Angle and Benoit at Saturday's UK pay-per-view Rebellion in a match perhaps most notable for the ungodly cheers and chants that went the way of erstwhile heel Kurt Angle. The rematch of the tournament final was taped for the November 7th episode of SmackDown to be contested as a 2 out of 3 falls bout. Just 16 days after becoming the first champions of those particular belts, Angle and Benoit dropped them to Edge and Mysterio in the match that may have spawned Mysterio's first ever around the ring post 619. It may not have equaled the greatness of the No Mercy final, but this free TV bout was right in that wheelhouse. And that had been the SmackDown trend for months prior, great matches on a seemingly weekly basis. Heyman's SmackDown wasn't going to deviate from this formula either. For Survivor Series, the 3 teams were booked to face off for the titles in a 3-way elimination match. And sure enough, the go-home SmackDown featured 3 singles matches that pitted the participants against each other. Edge over Chavo, Eddie over Rey, and feuding partners Benoit and Angle going to a double DQ when the other 4 men interfered. At Survivor Series, the titles changed hands for the 3rd time in 28 days after Los Guerreros outlasted the field to come away as champions. The match was very, very good, but perhaps not quite up to the lofty standards previously set by the 6 men in their mutual encounters. After Benoit and Angle lost a rematch against the Guerreros the following week, the 2 non-Guerrero duos functionally separated and the 4 returned to their singles pursuits. On the December 5th SmackDown, Angle outlasted Benoit, Eddie, and Edge in a 21-minute 4-way elimination match to become #1 contender to the WWE Championship, now held by The Big Show. While it was hardly SmackDown's last great match ever or anything, even for this general time period, one could still view it as the point where the SmackDown 6 began going their separate ways. Benoit did beat Eddie in a match at Armageddon that was befitting of their expectations, and did go on to challenge Angle for the title at the 2003 Royal Rumble. But no longer were the 6 men largely, and borderline exclusively, bound to one another. Once January rolled around, SmackDown was no longer formulaically putting the 6 against each other on a weekly basis, and by February of 2003, SmackDown began feeling like a different show altogether. Angle was WWE Champion, flanked by the talented call-ups Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas. Those 2 defeated an increasingly popular Eddie and Chavo Guerrero for SmackDown's tag team titles, and that feud would continue deep into the spring. Benoit returned to the upper mid-card following the Rumble and formed an unusual partnership with Rhino. Rey entered familiar terrain when when he joined the Cruiserweight division, setting his sights on champion Matt Hardy version 1. Edge, meanwhile, was sadly about to miss over a year of action after going under the knife for spinal fusion surgery. As for Heyman, the man who championed these talented men and the thrilling television that they provided, he was removed from his position as SmackDown's lead writer that February after falling out of favour with the bosses. So then, what is the ultimate legacy of the SmackDown 6 as a collective? Well, the fact that fans still remember who comprised that group a generation later speaks to their overall effectiveness. They may be as emblematic of the early Ruthless Aggression era as anyone. They can also take at least partial credit for something else, notching SmackDown up in the internal war with Monday Night Raw. When the brand extension started, Vince McMahon reportedly wanted to induce real competition between the two sides, which explains the need for separate writing teams. Raw had nominally been the designated A show despite SmackDown's placement on the fledgling UPN network, and Vince apparently saw the split as a chance to get his staffers to try and outdo each other, creating better shows as a result. Before September, Raw had beaten SmackDown in the Nielsen ratings every single week in 2002. In 17 weeks, beginning with the September 2nd episode of Raw and running through to the December 26th SmackDown, Raw only beat SmackDown 8 of those 17 times. SmackDown took 6 of the battles while tying Raw 3 times. Now, admittedly, this is in part due to Raw's numbers greatly declining in the losses of major stars and things like that, but SmackDown largely remained consistent throughout the year. One could certainly credit a stronger TV product keeping the audience invested. Granted, those 6 weren't the only things keeping SmackDown on the up and up around this time. Young and intriguing Brock Lesnar as champion, for example, and the presence of a popular star like The Undertaker, clever characters like Matt Hardy, and the early stages of freestyling John Cena, not to mention a pair of excellent wrestlers in Haas and Benjamin. This all played a part in fortifying SmackDown to a heavy degree. Meanwhile, over on Raw, for example, you had Katie Vick, HLA, the Triple H Train from Hell, and other components that make Monday nights a good night to see who was winning the football game instead. Go NFL, yeah. And yes, in full disclosure, SmackDown had weird angles of their own, like Al Wilson and the fiasco of his short-lived marriage to Dawn Marie. But at least Taz and a less insufferable Michael Cole got some mileage out of that absurdity. While each of the two brands had their strengths and weaknesses, SmackDown was boosted by its emphasis on quality wrestling. Angle, Mysterio, Edge, Benoit, and the Guerreros played a massive role in defining 2002 WWE SmackDown as the place to be for some of the best wrestling on the planet, anchoring what was arguably the best half-year stretch for any WWE brand at any time.